how many of you have been to a formal storytelling evening? A handful of you. How many of you feel like you've been trapped at a storytelling evening at a dinner party? Okay, much more. Okay. Well, I hope this has a little to do with both of those, but only in the best possible way. We'd also like to welcome our viewers. We are live streaming this evening from our USA Today Network Facebook page and our USA Today Facebook page and the Commercial Appeals Facebook page. So we'd like to thank everyone who's watching at home, including Sarah's mom and I think Katie's mom and a variety of people who are here tonight, and hopefully my parents. We want to explain to you what you're here to do. The Storytellers Project launched in 2011 as a way for the USA Today Network to connect more deeply with audiences. We believe what you believe, that when people share true first-person stories, when people talk about themselves, they connect a little more deeply. We believe that their neighbors and their friends and their colleagues will care more about them, that you will start to invest more deeply in your city emotionally, financially, personally. When you know a little bit more about the people who share your community, you want to invest, you want to sort of vote in their best interest, you want to know what's going on with them, and you want to look out for them. We see oral storytelling as part of that tradition of just getting to know your neighbors, and when you know people, it's much easier to like them and look out for them. We would really like to thank the Halloran Center for Performing Arts and Education for hosting us here tonight. Isn't this an incredibly elegant space? We're very happy to be here. We started the Storytellers Project like you start most good things, in bars. And we are thrilled to have outgrown most of them across the country, and we're very happy to be here this evening. We'd also like to thank our colleagues at the Commercial Appeal. Mark has an incredibly dedicated staff. You're going to hear from one of them on this stage this evening, but they really do get up and they go to work every day to help serve and reflect this community. And so we thank them for being our co-hosts tonight, but also for the work that you guys do every day.
Thank you.
I'm going to keep going. I'm almost done. Also, we'd like to thank our storytellers. You will hear from 5 of your neighbors this evening. All of them have volunteered to work on their stories. They, as you will tell, this evening is not totally extemporaneous. It is not an open mic night. They practiced their stories. I think they talked to themselves in mirrors and cars, and they bored their spouses. So we super appreciate them and all of their friends for listening to these stories tonight before they got here. And what we hope you feel like tonight is like a visit. Storytelling is really predicated on opening your heart and listening to someone else talk. And it's okay if you're on your phones. I mean, you can be. But as long as your hearts are open and you're listening in that way, we know that that's how community change really happens. We will not be selling you anything. We are not going to be doing like educational talks, inspirational speeches. This is not a TED Talk. No one is going to try to convince you of any big thing. Instead, we hope that you see yourselves reflected in these storytellers.
Welcome again and good evening. Before I start, I want to make sure that we do one thing, and it's always an important thing, and I'm going to do it very quickly here. I'm going to turn my phone off.
So respectful.
So this is a no ringtone zone. Please, thank you.
Okay.
So tonight's I'm an American session is one of 5 shows across the country. Phoenix, Des Moines, Nashville, and Cincinnati were earlier this year. They're dedicated to harnessing the power of story for better understanding of America and Americans. Tonight we celebrate our country's diversity through telling stories about the values that bind all of us. We bring you tonight a story from an educational advocate, a veteran, a chief marketing officer, an educator, and a chief artistic officer, as well as a journalist, as Megan mentioned earlier. The stories they tell are all different, but taken together, they are part of the fabric that makes this country so remarkable. They have one thing in common. They are all proud to call themselves Americans. You might recognize yourself in one or all of their stories. Some are funny, others are intense. What we ask you to do is to receive their stories with the spirit intended. It's how a community connects. It's how community connections really happen.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Actually, and if I can ask you guys, can you bring up the house lights a little bit so our storytellers can see the audience? Thank you. Awesome. You can even bring them up Awesome. That's perfect. Thanks. Because we want to be able to see our storytellers. It's comforting when you try to make jokes to at least see if people are smiling a tiny bit. It's creepy to talk out into the void. Thank you so much. We also want you guys to know we brought this show to Memphis, and we were really, really excited to be here. You're one of Gannett owns 109 newspapers, and so we handpicked some of these cities. And we were particularly excited to be here this evening because Memphis is home to so many moments that we acknowledge really make us distinctly American, whether it's blues and rock and roll, or really the deep struggle for civil rights and social justice that is still playing out literally every single day today. We know many of our best models, people who are role models for others and leaders across the country, both present and past. They live here in Memphis, or they did live here in Memphis. And so we're proud to bring this night to your community to help share some of what makes Memphis so special, literally with the rest of the country. And we know we have international viewers as well on our Facebook page. But we're going to get right into it in half a second. I just wanted to say, if you're curious about the people on this stage tonight or others like them, the I'm an American program is part of this whole year-long initiative from Gannett. You can check it out if you Google that on Facebook or you go to the USA Today page. We are profiling a unique American every single week who serves their community and does something powerful to lift up others and empower others. They're a super diverse group of people, and these nights are part of the outgrowth of that project in which we're just trying to reflect the best of our communities in a meaningful way. So you can check that out on Facebook. And with that, you introduce Jason.
So now we have our first storyteller. Are you ready? Are you ready? All right, we're in Memphis, Tennessee here. We got to be ready. Our first speaker is Jason Farmer. He's going to share a story, and he's got his fan club here too. He's going to share a story of a childhood rich in lessons, but poor in actual income. Jason?
Good evening. I'm very honored to be here tonight, standing before you. I want to give a special thanks to my wife, Audrey, of 17 years, to our children, Jason and Allison, to my mom, Barbara, who's here tonight. My cousin, Orlando, is here. I have colleagues, I have high school classmates, I have college classmates. I have one of my former employers and one of my business mentors, Mr. Ed Stanton, is here. So I think I covered all aspects of my life. And it was important that these people all be here because your collective efforts, in part, are part of the reason why I'm here tonight. And I want to thank you for the roles you've played in my life and for the opportunity to be here. My name is Jason A. Farmer. I'm a native Memphian. I'm a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps. So our story tonight is going to traverse our beginnings from one of the housing projects here in Memphis. I grew up in the Foot Homes housing projects at 413 Vance, Apartment C. I'm the oldest of 5 children. I'm 48 years old. I have a sister, Barbara, who's 46. I have a brother, Robert, that's 44. I have a brother, Jeff, who's 42. And I have a sister, Bridget, who's 40. We grew up as a documented 4th generation in poverty. And what 4th generation poverty looks like is chronic underemployment, few educational attainments as a family unit, no generational transfers of wealth or poverty, and it presents a lot of challenges. And though we were in the projects, our parents always gave us a sensibility and a mentality that we should always reach and seek beyond our present environment. My sister Barbara just recently completed writing a book, and ironically, it's about these poor black people from this housing project in Memphis, Tennessee. And the title of her book is Flying Without Wings. And when she was sharing the book with me and we were proofing the book, she asked me if I would write the foreword. And I want to get this right. I know Megan asked me not to look at the phone, but I want to make sure I get this foreword right because it's very important. So the foreword reads as follows. The fullness of your dreams, hopes, and aspirations should not be defined by the limitations of your environment. One more time. The fullness of your dreams, hopes, and aspirations should not be defined by the limitations of your environment. J.A. Farmer. So we grew up with these very humble beginnings. I looked up humble in the dictionary, and it says of low, political, social, or disadvantaged standing. And I thought that was an adequate descriptor of my family and our beginnings. Yet, my mother always instilled in us this quiet confidence that although we were in the projects, we had greater dreams that we were supposed to aspire to. So my mom and my dad, they both worked, and they were married young, and things were just difficult. My parents were blue-collar workers, and I remember times when we look back and we reflect back on where we were and the challenges that they were able to meet as this young married couple facing these incredible odds. You know, I remember times when as we got a little bit older, my mom worked at First Tennessee Bank right down the street from here. And inside of First Tennessee Bank, there are these large law firms. And my mom would bring home discarded law books from the law firms. Now, you may ask, why would a child living in the projects need law books from these large law firms? Well, embracing the spirit of the law was absolutely necessary if you were going to be the first black president of the United States. So my mom had the audacity to tell me, living in the projects right down the street, that I could be the president of the United States. So President Barack Obama may have beat me to it, but my mom planted a seed long time ago at 413 Vance Apartment C that it was indeed a reality and a possibility. And that kind of set the stage for what was going to happen. And our mom was somewhat of a visionary. This was pre-internet, so you can imagine us walking down the street, walking down Vance Street, going across Danny Thomas, holding hands, going to the Vance Public Library. We all had library cards when we were 2-3 years old. We all learned to read before we went to kindergarten. Even today, an oddity for poor kids, because poor kids generally don't learn to read, because there's a lot of other challenges and environmental factors that affect that. But she would take us down to the library, and these books, again, pre-internet, so we're in these books and these encyclopedias, and it opened up worlds. It opened up worlds that weren't constrained, or they weren't restricted based on some superficial things or boundaries that life and circumstances sometimes create. See, our parents in their wisdom, although they weren't college educated, there's getting just blue-collar working class people, but they had the forethought and the knowledge to reach outside of their circle and allow people outside of the group to envelop us. Y'all have heard the adage that it takes a village to raise a child. This is especially true for poor children, because we don't have the access, we don't have the resources, we don't have the tools, so we have to reach out in this group effort and do these things. And so from that, a deep sense of community evolved. We believe in helping people. So in our household, some things just kind of evolved into living mantras. We believe in giving back. We believe in helping others. We believe in praying to God. We believe in giving thanks. We believe in being prepared for the opportunities that we have before us and the opportunities that are yet to come. And these are all things that, when I look back, that these great traits and attributes, they were born out of this impoverished situation that we were in. And we grew up literally blocks from historic Claiborne Temple. And I can remember at times when we look back, we ate a lot of rice. So as kids, you know, we thought our mom was a gourmet rice chef. So but now don't get me wrong. Every bowl, every pot, every casserole dish was simply delicious. But we didn't quite understand that rice is cheap, rice is plentiful, and rice can also be used with every meal. So these are the kind of things that we worked through so that we had the audacity to be living in this impoverished situation and didn't even know that we were poor. And as it goes, and so we grew up just blocks from historic Claiborne Temple. And some of our neighbors were the sanitation workers who were a part of the I'm a Man civil rights marches. I was young at that time and didn't really understand what that march was, but I did understand when we saw Mr. Jones and we saw Mr. White and we saw Mr. Smythe, they would come home covered in trash because these were men who went to work for 10, 12, 13 hours a day, and they didn't have facilities where they could wash themselves before they came home, and we would watch them stand outside to get undressed before they would go inside of the house. These were my neighbors. So we literally grew up blocks from Lorraine Hotel. Well, ultimately, Dr. King gave his life for all humanity. And we also grew up in the shadows of the funeral home where Dr. King, that will prepare Dr. King for his last journey before he left Memphis. So these are all the things that kind of culminated to make form my childhood and form my young adulthood going into manhood. When I was in junior high school, Mr. Nelson, one of my junior high band directors, introduced me to music. And a lifelong love affair with music and the arts was born. Mr. Nelson can't be here tonight. We still keep in touch. We go to lunch on a monthly basis. He's not feeling well tonight, but he may be watching the streaming. And I told him I will send him out a shout since he's not here tonight. So I'm going to shout out Mr. Nelson. I'll come see you later on this week. But this lifelong love affair with music and the arts was born. And I went on to high school, and this love affair with music put me in a position to win college scholarships. And I remember, along with several of my high school classmates, winning a scholarship to attend Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I could not wait to go to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and march with the Jaguars. This was an incredible marching band. And I remember the weekend that it was supposed to be the big campus visit, and my friends were going down, and everyone was all excited about what was going on. And I remember my dad's car broke down. That's a part of being impoverished. So we always had like these raggedy cars and hand-me-down clothes and on and off food stamps and commodities to fill the gap. We never had quite enough. It was literally a struggle from day to day, from week to week. But to my parents' credit, we were never hungry. We were never without clothes, and we were never on the street. There were a whole lot of nights it like went down to the wire. We just weren't exactly sure how we were going to make it, but we always made it. But it was this assuredness that created this sense in me where I really didn't understand how poor we were. And I sometimes joke that we were P.O.po. And I didn't even understand until the reality hit in high school on that weekend. We were supposed to go to Baton Rouge, and my dad's car broke down. And I remember standing there holding this flashlight. My dad had been a mechanic when he was in the Army, and he's working on this car, and he always got these cars to work Monday through Friday. It was ironic because he always got to work. But sometimes on the weekend, we had to kind of get around how we got around. So we're looking at this car, and he's working on this car, and I remembered I just started crying because the reality set in that even with scholarships, college for me at that point, going out of town, was not a reality. It was not within my reach. It wasn't realistic. So I had to come up with something different. I had to do something that was not going to impact my family financially because we just didn't have it. As bad as they wanted us to have it, they wanted me to be the first to attend college. They wanted me to do all these great things. That reality hit, and it hit hard. So I said, step back for a minute. I had to gather myself, and then I came up with this idea. And my dad had been in the Army, and this was the Vietnam era. He didn't want me to join the military. And I remember I came home and told him, I said, I'm joining the Marine Corps. And there was this stark silence. And he was like, I told you, don't do that. We're going to figure this out. I was like, no, I already figured it out. I already signed the paperwork. And I remember he and my mom would kind of cry. It was the first time I saw my dad cry. And it was when I told him I had joined the Marine Corps. And I don't really, to this day, don't really know what the tears were, if they were tears of fear for what was about to happen to me, or if they were just tears of frustration that I didn't listen. But I went on, I joined the Marine Corps. And it turned out to be an absolutely fantastic opportunity for me. So through the Marine Corps, I became a citizen of the world. This kid from the projects, from these poor situations, I went around the world. And I was able to meet some amazing people, do some amazing things. It was difficult. I won't stand here and lie for you. The Marine Corps is difficult by intent. It's a difficult job, and it's not for everyone. That's why we have that slogan, the few, the proud. It's more than a slogan. It's reality. And some things happen in the Marine Corps that I just could not believe. I remember in boot camp sometimes if you got hurt or something tragic happened at home, they'd let you leave from boot camp and go home. And I would pray every night, please, God, let me break my leg like with a compound fracture. I don't want to be crippled, but I do want to go home. I would pray that every night so I could get out of boot camp because it was extremely difficult. But God saw fit to do some other things, and he let me make it through boot camp. And Lord knows it was a struggle, again, day to day, moment to moment. But I go through that, and I get these wonderful opportunities. Megan, where's Megan? If I get to it, then okay. So we get these opportunities through the Marine Corps. And I come back home, and I get some opportunities to go to school. I returned to school on a GI Bill. I went to Shelby State Community College and then transferred to Christian Brothers University. I've had the opportunities. This is a young man from the projects. I've met U.S. presidents. I've met U.S. senators, governors, Fortune 500 icons, celebrities, all with the same ease and comfort that my mom instilled in us walking down Vance Avenue going to that public library, picking up those books and taking those books back home. And that confidence allowed me to do some things that statistics say should not have happened. None of us have been incarcerated. We're all college educated. We're all homeowners. You know, we've all have fantastic careers. We're all doing exceptionally well. And these are things that, according to statistics, that never should have happened. And this is from right here in Memphis, Tennessee. And that's why I'm such a strong champion for Memphis, Tennessee. I've been around the world, but I always come back to Memphis. And wherever I go, I tell this fantastic story about Memphis. I make sure I take my University of Memphis cap or my Grizzlies shirt. So I'm always representing Memphis because I want people to know about this excellence that we have here in Memphis. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves, even locally, about the excellence that we have in Memphis. We have challenges, true. Every place has challenges. But Memphis is a fantastic place. It gave me some fantastic opportunities. I'm very proud to be from here. And I'm thankful for this opportunity. And these are some of the things that go into the weaving and the thread that make me an American. And sometimes, you know, we're here, and particularly in the socio-political climate that we're in right now, sometimes we wonder. We wonder about, you know, in spite of the difficulties of the moment, in spite of the socio-economic climate, in spite of sometimes her inequalities or inefficiencies, in spite of sometimes America not really sure about how to embrace my blackness and my existence here. But my name is Jason A. Farmer, and I am an American, and I'm proud to be here. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you guys, Jason will be taking over my job from here on out, and possibly yours. Jason, thank you so much for that story. We're particularly grateful for him sharing and reflecting on what it was like to grow up, frankly, poor. A lot of us did, but I think generally the media and our culture has a really awkward time talking about it and celebrating what you learn when you grow up in houses that have so much in terms of values and love, but don't have a lot in terms of material possessions. I know in my house, it was called tuna, peas, and rice. And I tried to explain what it was to one of my friends, and he just was like, cream of what? Like, that's, your mom served that to you? And I was like, yeah, once or twice a week. What did you eat? Brand name Doritos? Like, oh my gosh. So Jason, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know many of us in the audience can relate, but more broadly, thank you for introducing us to your parents. It's always such a blessing to get to meet people who are so wonderful and who've given so much to their children, who've given so much to their community. Our next storyteller this evening, we are very excited to welcome up your very own Tania Wethersby. She's a reporter and a columnist. She's a columnist here at the Commercial Appeal, and she has a story for us about lifelong learning.
Well, I was going to look at my my iPad, my phone here, but somehow I lost what I was going to say. So I guess now I've got to try to do, a good thing I practiced somewhat, but we'll just put it down. It's going to look awkward anyway. But anyhow, to tell my story is I'm listening to Jason, and I have to say up front, I did not grow up poor. I grew up pretty much African-American middle class in Jacksonville, Florida. But I was still born into a life of challenges. And I was kind of, it's interesting that it turned out that way because I was born 4 years after Emmett Till was murdered. I was born 4 years after Rosa Parks said, nah, I'm not getting up from my bus seat. So already being born African-American and female, right on the cusp of the civil rights movement and at a time when we were fighting for our rights, meant that I was going to be born into a life of challenges that were not challenges that came as a result of a physical disability or mental disability, but because of strictures imposed on me by society. And because I grew up black and middle class, my parents were both educators, they kind of prepared me for that, and they did a very good job at that. But still, when I went out into society and I started learning about things, my very first experiences in dealing with challenges came from, first of all, being in a segregated school. In my elementary school, it was pretty segregated. And I I'll never forget this, I took a reading test. And I was in the first grade, and my reading level tested out to be almost at the 8th grade level. I was reading at a real high level. But because I was in a segregated environment, there were no gifted programs for people like kids like me at the time. So I didn't get to really use my potential in that way. And that was something that I think instilled in me a spirit of being able to say, okay, I know I can do these things, but I need to find a platform to do it, and I need to find a way to challenge myself. That's always been a part of who I am. And I got the first chance to do that when I was in high school. And this was a very big turning point in my life. I won this countywide essay contest. My high school was William Raines High School in Jacksonville, Florida. I just came off a class reunion tour. We went on a cruise to Caribbean, got stuck out there with Irma for a few days. So we had some extra days together. But during that time, a very big turning point in my life was I won a countywide essay contest that I didn't expect to win. It was a contest that involved a lot of private schools. My high school was predominantly African American. We were always being put down all the time about the students not being academically prepared and not knowing enough. But here I am, just this girl from the school who beat out like close to 100 kids from all these schools. And that was my first experience really understanding what writing could do, that writing and expression could really take me places. And the place I went was the Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, where I heard a lot of ideological speeches all over that weekend when I was there. But the thing that grasped me the most was looking at the changes in the terrain, looking at the snow on the mountains and all of those things. And I'm thinking, I'm so fortunate to be here and to be able to see these things. I want other people to see the things that I see. I want other people to see the perspectives that I see. But that was my very first time at doing that. But anyhow, what happened from then on in is I decided at that point that journalism was my calling. So I applied to get into the University of Florida. And I got into University of Florida because at the time they were trying to recruit a lot of people from Raines High School. As a matter of fact, the first African-American quarterback at University of Florida, Don Gaffney, came from my high school. So they were really keen on students from my high school coming to University of Florida. And I decided to major in journalism. Even through college, I was in classes, I was making the highest grades in the English classes all the time at this institute where a lot of other people thought that it was very difficult for people like myself, a woman of my color and coming from the school I came from, was going to make it. But I graduated and I did pretty good. My first job out of high school actually was with the Gannett paper. It was at the Pensacola News Journal, which is where I initially worked. And I've parlayed that into a job after 4 years at the Florida Times-Union in Jacksonville, Florida. And I had a very long career at the Florida Times-Union because Jacksonville obviously is my hometown. But my career in journalism extended into other parts of my life, and it extended into other things that made me want to use my voice to challenge injustice and to challenge the things that other people face. And just to help other people get through their challenges. And one of the things I did in terms of doing that was I moved when I bought my first house, and I still have it in Jacksonville. I moved to this inner city community called Springfield. It's still in the throes of revitalization, but I lived next to some of the poorest people, and I moved there on purpose because I always felt that sometimes we don't see these experiences as close as we can. And because people live so far from each other, we really don't have the empathy we need to have to deal with these situations. And so it did a couple things for me. First of all, I got to meet a neighbor. I had a neighbor of mine that I helped a lot. Her name was Anita. And she got into a minor scrape with one of her sons. It was pretty minor, but she faced going to jail for like a good bit of time for it, when she deserved to have counseling for it. And so what happened was her bond was set at $10,000. Of course, she didn't have $10,000, but we helped raise $1,000 to get her out. And that was the first time, the very first time I got a glimpse of what collateral consequences for crime mean, because she was the only support for her family. Had she stayed in jail for, a week or so, she would have lost her job. Who was going to take care of her family? When this was an incident that would have that could have been resolved with some counseling. But that was during the time when they were really giving these harsh sentences and everything. But we got out and we helped her. But I got a real good lesson up front seeing that. In my journalism career at the Florida Times-Union, the big turning point for me was being put on the editorial board, or before that. I finally had a chance to write a column, and I wrote a weekly column that won a lot of awards. One of the experiences I had in doing that column was I got a chance to live with homeless people. I lived with homeless women because we were doing a project. It's funny, we were doing a project on homelessness, and there were guys who were doing the project. And so I go up to the city desk, I said, Metro desk, I said, listen, I want to be involved in this project because nobody's telling the women's side of it. If you have these guys, my colleagues, going out to stay with these homeless men, they're living on the streets, and they're staying in the shelters with the homeless men, who's going to tell the women's story? So I volunteered to do that, go tell the women's story, and they let me do it. And so one of my colleagues was concerned because he said out on the streets, you had guys trying to hit on me, and they were trying to protect me, and they couldn't focus on their job because they were trying to protect me. So I'll be all right. Don't you got to worry about me. I'll be okay. So anyhow, what happened was what I learned during that period, staying with homeless women, where there were women who had been wound up being homeless a lot of times because of bad decisions, a lot of times because they hadn't found their own independence, they hadn't found their own voice, and a lot of times just because, things that we ignore in society, just the sexism a lot of them go through, a lot of the domestic violence things that we don't look at. But I learned a lot, from the women, staying with them. And also staying with women out on the beach. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand what it's like to be held hostage just by your hygiene. We have people fussing about people bathing in places. Well, you can't get back and forth if you don't have a place and you smell bad. So, I learned about a lot of things. That gave me a lot of insight. And that's insight I still try to use today when I write about these issues and I write about these things for the commercial appeal. And that's when I saw a lot of my Americanness, is because I see myself as being an American in terms of trying to get people to see the other side of things, to immerse myself in experiences that would give me another side of things. And I was able to do that for quite a while at the Times-Union. I was a first African-American appointed to the editorial board. And that's when things started to change for me, because at that point, I was more of a person in the office a lot. And I like to kind of be out on the streets doing things. So those things kind of changed for me. I also went through a period of time where there were people who don't want to hear these stories about other people, and they want your voice, but they don't want the reality that your voice brings. They want to hear you, but they don't want you into it. They want it to be kind of sanitized, and they want you to be nice to people, and they want you to stop talking about the marginalized people if you're not going to if it means blaming the people who are doing the marginalizing. And that's just something I couldn't quite live with. That was something I couldn't do. So over a period of time, while I was faithful and I worked very hard and everything, I became restless. I needed a new challenge. And so in 2011, I took a big leap of faith, and I took a buyout, and I went back to graduate school at age 52. I went to graduate school at University of Florida. Had to take a test and everything. I got in. And had to take another test. I mean, I've experienced, okay, I guess I have to take a test. Well, I got into the graduate school because in the meantime, I had done things, you're talking about travel. I've been to Cuba 14 times because again, I'm trying to learn about the other side of things, about the impact of the embargo on everyday Cubans, the fact that much of Cuba, many of the Cubans are Afro-Cubans, and they're people of color, and their legacy and their history is almost the same as African Americans here. All the deep histories of people in Latin America and all the ties that we have. I'm always interested in the ties that bind. You know, even if, as an American, I'm always looking at, you know, what those ties are. So I took all that expertise and I decided I'm going to get a master's. So I get into graduate school at University of Florida. I decided to pursue my master's in mass communication with an international specialty in international intercultural communications. And this was probably one of the bigger challenges of my life, because for like 2.5, almost 3 years, I drove 90 miles 90 miles round trip 3 times a week to go from Jacksonville to Gainesville to get that master's degree. And in 2016, I walked. I got my master's degree, and I picked up a certificate in Latin American studies as well. I learned all the way when I was doing that I had enough credits to do that. So I said, why not? I just go ahead and get it all. So as it turns out, I'm looking for a job then. You know, I've, pretty much, spent a lot of money going there, except for the last 3 semesters when I got an assistantship. So I'm still looking for employment. And I was actually focusing on trying to teach. And then I'm just calling around, and I call this fellow here, just looking for a job teaching. And it just so happens that the Commercial Appeal at the time was looking for a Metro columnist. The Commercial Appeal was interested in me. And so, lo and behold, they ended up bringing me to Memphis. But another challenge came up right before this happened. 2 days before I got the call from Mark Russell about the job and how, and I had gotten the job, I learned that I had breast cancer. And that was quite a blow. It was 2 days, exactly 2 days before that. And so I'm like, okay, well, here you go, Weathersbee. What are we going to do now? You got the master's, you got the certificate, you got a job. But now, here's what you're dealing with now. You don't have a societally imposed problem like racism or sexism, but now you have another one. You got a real challenge now with your health, and the other challenge is your age. It's now I'm, 56 years old, So I'm trying to figure out what to do, how vulnerable am I going to be if I go? Is that going to impact my health? So I'm saying, well, what can, another challenge is, how do I deal with this new challenge in my life, and how do I make this work? Well, I did what I always did. I just made it work. So I just worked to make. So I made the decision to have a mastectomy. Mercifully, the cancer had not spread. It was just stage 1 cancer. And I opted for the mastectomy and the reconstruction. My plastic surgeon and my doctors were kind of concerned about me moving to Memphis, because they were saying, well, you got to take treatment, and it's not just a one-stop shop. I said, well, but I got to give this a try. If I don't do this, then everything I fought for in my life, it'll be gone. I've got to at least give this a try. So that's what I did. And as it turns out, once I had all my surgery done and they removed all the drainage things out and stuff, and you go through all of that. You have to pin it to your clothes and all that stuff. The week before I was I packed a suit. I hadn't had a chance to get an apartment yet. That was kind of an ordeal, as some people might know. But I packed all my suitcases. I packed 5 suitcases, put them in my car. Drove to Atlanta on the 29th. I drove to Atlanta on the 29th of October last year, stayed overnight with a friend, drove to Memphis the next day from Atlanta. I was at work at the Commercial Appeal on October 31st, 2016. I reported for work at the Commercial Appeal. So I guess, my American story is simply this. Life will throw challenges at you. I learned just from, it is, and the thing is, it's a mental thing, and trying to not let the challenges block you, because now, besides having now a pre-existing condition, I'm middle-aged, but, I think I can stand as an example of just having the attitude to try to continue to do the best, to continue to improve your life, and do what you need to do to get ahead. Because the thing for me is that I cannot live just staying in one place, just stagnating. That's one reason why I make a lot of decisions that I make, is because stagnancy to me is death. Even if stagnancy means security, it's still death. And I think that's part of why, the American the American experience I exhibit is just the idea of being an American and taking on challenges because we are American. Like John F. Kennedy say, we don't do things because they're easy, we do them because they're hard. And that's probably part of my story and the thing that's made my life, you know, pretty understanding who I am. Born African American, born female, born during a time of challenges and a time when we're seeing these challenges emerge again, you know, and letting the experiences of my life not just do something for me, but use these experiences to see other people and to tell their stories as well. And that's why it makes me an American, is because I'm up to the American challenge, and I want to see everybody else up to that challenge as well.
Thank you so much, Tania, for that American story. Thank you for your candor. Thank you for your insight into your career and your journey thus far, for sharing your story of surviving cancer, and also for sharing your tales of your dedication to your field, journalism. And I'm so happy I heard you. Next up, we have Katie Smythe, who is the artistic director of the new Ballet Ensemble. She also is an educator, a dancer, and tonight she'll share a story about one of her biggest lessons and how it has shaped her work today. Katie Smythe.
Hi. My name is Katie Smythe, and I am an American, but being a Memphian is profoundly important to me. And I think that's probably because I moved away for about 17 years and had the opportunity to come home. Growing up in Memphis was very interesting, being the kind of kid I was, but I was mostly heavily influenced by my grandmothers from Tupelo and from Memphis. My mother's mother, Catherine, was an educator. She found a way to make sure that every child she ever met would go to college. And if she had to pay for it, she did it. My father's mother, Mary Clay, Mommy, was a ballerina. She never graduated from high school because she had an appendectomy at the age of 17 and couldn't climb the stairs to Central High to the 3rd floor for her homeroom classes. And so she dropped out of school, but wound up dancing at Chicago Lyric Opera, coming home because it was unseemly to have a daughter on the stage. Her father was running for political office. But she married my grandfather and began to teach during the Great Depression. She taught children no matter what they could pay. If it was 5 cents, 1 cent, or nothing at all, she would feed them dinner and make their clothes and take them home. And she taught ballet in her living room daily. I remember distinctly when she was sewing some clothes for some children at the Episcopal Girls' Home. These were girls who were foster children who had been taken off the street to find a better life. And I said, you know, Mommy, why don't you make clothes for me? These are really cool clothes. You're making them so now and of today, and I don't have anything like that. My clothes are so conservative. And she said, but you have everything you need. These girls don't. That informed my life for a very long time because I was hyper aware that I had everything I needed. And although my grandmother's influence on me was incalculable, it was really my mother who figured out all of my problems while I was away at London at the Royal Academy of Dance. I came home to find that I had been registered for Central High School, a Memphis city school. And I'd grown up in a parochial school, well, an Episcopal school, a day school with the same children from the age of 3 and through the 8th grade. I was terrified. I didn't know where I was going. But the truth is I had never really fit in my private school. I was an artist. I was a dancer. I was always at ballet. I couldn't even answer the question anymore when kids asked me, why are you always at ballet? Really, the answer was I love it, but I was embarrassed to tell them. It was everything I was. All I wanted to do was dance. But I was a good student. And so my mother had a real conundrum. What am I going to do with my oddball child who won't stop dancing, just like her grandmother, but who's a really good student? She could be such a great academic, and of course there's the other grandmother expecting that I will go to college. So she colluded with a great lady, Florence Loeffler. Florence is still alive today. She was the principal of Central High School. And together they arranged for me to have an arts education in a Memphis city school that was not an arts education institution. They tailor-made my education for me. They helped me map my dreams, and I didn't even really participate in the process. I came to Central High straight from London, where I had decided not to remain to dance in high school. And I walked into a place where I was an oddball. I had a lot of resources compared to most of those kids. There were kids of all colors. It was a very diverse school at the same time, and some of the smartest kids in the city went to that school. Many of them are working today in journalism, medicine, and movie making. I didn't think that I'd be accepted. I really thought that I could only be friends with people who looked like me, with people who thought like I did, and there were maybe a handful of them that had come from Grace St. Luke's with me to Central. But Mrs. Loeffler made sure that I put myself out there. She put me in classes with seniors for AP Humanities. She made sure I got a grade for ballet so I didn't have to take PE and embarrass myself. That was a gift. I hope I got A's. I have no idea what grade I got in ballet. I took French, which is the language of ballet, and I gave oral dissertations on the history of dance. But she said, young lady, I'm going to do all of this for you. I am going to help you find balance in your life. But you're going to do one thing for me. You're going to dance in the talent show. I thought, well, sure, that's for all the stuff I'm getting. I missed about 40 days of school my senior year so that I could perform in other city schools around town with my company. I'll do that. I'll perform in the talent show. So the day came, and then I realized really I didn't know what I'd gotten myself into. Because as I stood backstage in my tutu from Giselle, waiting to dance this 19th century anachronism, I was listening to my peers on stage singing James Ingram, George Benson, Aretha Franklin. Yeah. What had I done? Had I really miscalculated this moment? And I knew nothing else. All I knew was classical ballet. I couldn't go out there and do a jazz dance. No one had ever taught me one. I didn't really know an American art form, and I was in the thick of America. So I had to do what I had to do. I had to get up there and do it, right? So I walked out to silence. After thunderous applause, I walked out to silence and waited for my music. I was on automatic. Muscle memory is a great thing. It kicked in. I did my dance in my cat's paw point shoes. My mother had gone to Mr. Galtelli to get rubber to put on my shoes, so at least I wouldn't fall down in front of 800 kids who I wanted to be my friends. And there was a moment of silence at the end, and I thought, oh no, that's it. I really am irrelevant. I really don't belong. I really am just that girl that has everything and no one really likes. But before I heard anything, I felt this wave come from the back row of the Central High School auditorium and wash down every single row, and it's a big place, up onto the stage, into my soul, and it was love, which is a lot better than applause. And it was acceptance, and it was community. These women in my life had created a scenario where I would walk onto the stage and find my community. But that's not the end of my story. Florence Loeffler had more for us. But I wasn't alone anymore. As I walked down the halls, I was ballerina toes, but at least they were smiling at me when they said that. My AP history teacher was the athletic coach, Coach Cates, and he asked me to run hurdles on the track team. He was pretty angry when I said no, but of course I couldn't do that. But he was impressed, and that was important because he didn't like me before I danced. And as I made friends, I probably stayed pretty close to people who looked like me, acted like me, people I had known or who my parents knew, their families. And we walked in one day, Mrs. Loeffler called us into the Central High School gym for a pep rally. Sat with our friends, waited for the pep rally, and then kept saying, wait, we have a game tonight? We weren't really sure what she was doing. And she walked in with a microphone and in her booming voice said, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to look at ourselves, and I want you to look at you. All of the white kids are sitting on this side of the gym, and all of the black kids are sitting on this side of the gym. Why? And then, like any good negotiator, she was silent. She had just pointed the finger at our unconscious racism and asked us to solve it. I'm not sure what we got done that day, but our answer to her was, the why is we're sitting with our friends. She said, yes, I know. That's the problem. And throughout the rest of that year, she called us into assemblies to keep discussing it. We formed small groups and boards, and they were intentionally diverse. She engineered diversity within our class of a small school, 800 kids, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And we started having tough conversations in 1980 about race and class, economics, privilege, racism, systemic racism. And I'm so grateful to her for the power that she gave all of us to make change in the world. If we could just have the courage to take all of these bits of information from our lives and her question so that we could reach out and use whatever we have, whatever resources we have, to make change in our city, and hopefully to have that radiate out into the world. And really, there's no better time to talk about this during MLK 50 than during MLK 50, when we have the chance to create community projects that are funded by our city, perform on the stage with kids who come together from Orange Mound, North Memphis, South Memphis, Central Gardens, to grow up as family together, to show the community these images of diversity and togetherness through the arts, which is such a transformative experience, so that people's souls can open up and a wave can wash over them from the stage to the back rows of the Levitt Shell on Friday night. That's a plug. And they can be filled with the question of why, and try to answer Dr. King's question, where do we go from here, chaos or community, with we are going on from here as a community. Thank you.
Oh, Katie, thank you so much for your story, and thank you so much for the work you do. Do you guys know about Katie's school? She's at the new Ballet Ensemble and School. Can we have a round of applause for their work all the time here? It's such a blessing to hear a story from a person who has taken one of their talents and put it to use for their whole community. But it's also, I think, a real blessing to listen to a person tell a story about someone who changed their life and inspired them to try to carry on that change in the lives of others. So to Mrs. Loeffler, we do hope you're watching. Thank you for what you've sparked in Katie, and now so many of us who've gotten to hear your story and Katie's story. Our next storyteller this evening is Sarah Carpenter. Sarah, ready? Yes, bring it up. Where's Sarah? Yes! Thrilled to have Sarah's also brought a color-coordinated cheering section, which is super impressive, and I think a real lesson to all of our storytellers. Sarah is a community organizer who's going to talk to us about how she got started.
Good evening. I think I'm the only one asked for a trip. I changed my mind, Megan. I changed my mind. I'm so honored to be here tonight. Jason, Katie, Tonyaa, I sit there and I listen to you all and I realize how so connected we are. Jason, I know about the rice. Tonyaa, I know about the challenges just as you're getting ready to do exactly what you think your purpose is in life. Katie, I see children being not let into great schools anymore. I connected with you all. I started this journey. First, I want to acknowledge my team, powerful parents that's with me here tonight. My sister that never go anywhere, and I called her yesterday. I said, "You want to go?" She said, "I'll go." So my children that's here, and some of my grandchildren, I don't think all of them are here, invited some friends along. This journey started for me like in 2001. I was sitting in a cafeteria at a school that the concept of another school wanted to come to our community. I knew way before then that every school in my community was failing our children. The elementary school was failing our children. The middle school was failing, and the high school was a failing school. I knew that before anybody talked about education. I knew it because parents was coming up to me at the corner store in North Memphis. Katie, you talked about North Memphis. I connected with that. Saying, "Miss Sarah, my baby can't read," and they passing him from middle school to high school. So I knew that I had a granddaughter. I got to tell you, I got 4 daughters and 13 grandbabies. I knew that Kentoria, the following year in 2002, Kentoria would be headed to middle school. They call middle school 5th grade then. And I said, "Kentoria cannot go to a failing school." And I sit in this cafeteria with parents saying, "We don't want this school to come to our community." I can call names. Megan said I could call names. It was a KIPP school. Kentoria was going to 5th grade, and I said, "I want that school to come here." And I know that this school, we sit in the auditorium. I lost some friends along the way, but guess what I gained? I gained so many children going off to college and graduating from college. So that was the outcome that I fought for. KIPP came the following year, and Kentoria had an opportunity to cut the ribbon of the KIPP school. That's my oldest granddaughter again. I walked in that school every day. Y'all, I cleaned houses. Before I went and cleaned houses, I went to KIPP every day to hold people accountable for what they said they were going to do for our kids. Every day, every morning, I went to that school, and I stayed like 2 or 3 hours, and I'd take off and go clean the house, and I'd come back to KIPP and make sure that our kids were getting what they said they were going to get, and they did. In the earlier years, they got what they said they were going to give our children. As a result, Kentoria graduated from college in 2015, and she set the bar, the first in 4 generations to graduate from college in my family. Growing up in North Memphis, my dad died when I was 9. My mom didn't talk about college in our house because my mom was a single parent, going to work as a housekeeper also. But I knew what we seen on TV every day, save for your kids' college fund. Y'all remember those commercials. If you're 56, you remember those commercials. And I knew my mama couldn't save, and my mom knew she couldn't save. But I knew then I had children, and I preached going to school, go to school, and all my kids graduated from high school, but I knew I wanted more. And walking in KIPP doors, it taught me that you don't have to be rich to go to college. So I went round back home telling my kids about this school. It changed my mindset, so I knew I had to go and change my daughter's mindsets, and they changed their kids' mindsets. So I think it's about changing mindsets in our community, and we did that. I knocked on those doors. We needed 125 kids to open this school, and I started hitting every door I could that I knew kids was at to tell them about this school. And I always talk about George Davis, who was this kid in our community, lived right behind me. And George Davis' mom walked the streets on drugs over half of his life. And she's good today. She's doing good. And I told her today how proud I was of her. George Davis graduated with his master's degree in May. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit and talk about the Memphis Lift. All these orange shirts y'all see, the Memphis Lift. 2 people came from Nashville with an idea. I'm like, I done heard it all. I done seen every kind of organization come to my community and say they're going to do this, 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 and get funded for this, this, this. And you look on the news and they done misappropriated funding in our community, you know. So I didn't trust anybody coming to me saying they're going to do this, this, this. I had in my mind like, no, I'm going to do this, this, this. So Natasha and John came to Memphis with an idea of the Memphis Lift. It wasn't the idea of the Memphis Lift. It was a fellowship. They did this 10-week fellowship. They was looking for parents, and I still asked them today, how did y'all find me? And they was looking for parents, and most of the parents you see out here went through this 10-week fellowship with me, and all of us went through this fellowship together, and we learned so much about the landscape of education. It was stuff that all those years I was out there, it's still stuff I didn't even know that about TVAR schools. I didn't know nothing about all this. All I know that our kids was not getting the education that they deserved in North Memphis, South Memphis, Fraser, none of those communities. They weren't getting that education that they deserved to get. And I knew I had to do something to change it. And when they came to me, I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And so we went through that fellowship, and after that fellowship was over, we made it through those 10 weeks, and we knew we was on to something because we knocked on those doors. After the fellowship was over, we had a few funds left, people that wanted to invest in the community. We had some funding left over, and we said we're going to go knock on these doors. And I think it was me, Miss Fields, Johnny, and John, 4 of us. Jason, Foot Homes. We went to Foot Homes because one of those schools was on that priority list at that time. We knocked on those doors, and y'all, 95% of the parents wasn't aware that they were sending their kids to a low-performing school. And we knew we had to do something at that point. So we went back. We was working out a spaceship. We didn't even have anywhere to work. We were working out the Croc Center in a party room that looked like a spaceship. But it was fun, especially when my grandkids got to come there. It was real fun. So we worked, and we went back, and we told them these parents don't have any idea that they sending their kids to a priority school. So Natasha believed in us. She saw something in most of us, and especially me, that I didn't even see in myself. All I knew is I wanted kids to get what they needed, and especially the kids that had limited resources. I don't use the word needed, it's limited resources, and that's what we lack in the black community is resources. And we can prove it if you come to 1637 Britain, because our building, look, sit right in the heart of North Memphis. It's a plug again, Katie. And we take pride in that building, and people believed in investing in the people in the community, and we making it happen. Now, that first maybe year, we knocked on. That's how many doors we knocked on. And y'all, out of all those doors we knocked on, again, 95% of the parents didn't know We knocked on doors where people said, well, my grandmama went to that school, my mama went to that school, I went to that school. And I'm sitting there like, but your baby can't read. And I always use this quote. Harriet Tubman said, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if they only knew they were slaves. And I was a slave at one point, mind-wise, but somebody freed me. And that's what we're doing every day. We talking to parents. We knocked on those doors, and some parents said, well, what we going to do? And I was like, we sitting there like, I don't know. We didn't know. Because we was new to this. We didn't know. And so we knew we had to do something. So we got Miss Renee working with us. In choice counseling, we got 3 work streams. Choice counseling, where Miss Renee helped find great schools for children. When parents come in there knocking on the door saying they got to get their kids out of this school, da-da-da, Renee helped them find great schools. Miss Fields, who went through that first fellowship with Miss Fields waving, and Ms. Fields went through that first class, and now she's teaching that class, investing in community. I just keep saying investing in community. John and Johnny. Johnny went through the first class. Johnny, you here? Johnny? Johnny went through the first class, and now Johnny helped with the ServiceMaster team. The ServiceMaster team is the people that go out and knock on those doors still every day, and we still got parents not aware that they sending their kids to priority schools. So I just want to say that I'm proud to be an American, but I want Memphis to be great. And it can be great, and it is great. But I think everything that we see that go on in the news and what you write about in the commercial appeal, and it mostly affect the poor communities, black communities. And I believe if kids get a great education, and we teaching parents how to believe in education, value education in your house, and believe it or not, these parents want that for their children. And that's what we fight for every day, and we can't stop and we won't stop. So that's my story. I could go on, but I can't go on.
Thank you, Sarah, for your passion and for all you've done to make a difference for children in this community, advocating for those children, for the entire city, and for creating an entire movement. The Memphis Lift is dedication and empowerment personified. And it also is helping parents and communities to improve school systems, and the program is now a model for other U.S. cities. Now we come upon our final storyteller. It is Marvin Davis, who's going to close our show tonight with a story about coming home. Marvin?
All right, good evening. As you said, my name is Marvin Davis. I was born and raised in Memphis. More specifically, I grew up in Orange Mound. And if you're from Memphis, you know it's really Orange Mound. And let me just say, you're going to find this hard to believe, but I have never before this night met Katie, okay? But if I get into my story, you might wonder. I left Memphis roughly 34 years ago, and I just returned last year. So when you talk about coming home, I'm going to tell you a story for how we got from there to here. And when I reflect on growing up in Memphis, and I think about memories and events, there's no question in my mind, that there's a decision I made as a 12-year-old was the single biggest long-lasting impact on the rest of my life. And that decision was to, coming out of the 6th grade, to enter the Memphis City School optional program and go to Bellevue Junior High and Central High School instead of going to my neighborhood school. As I said, I grew up in Orange Mound, which was a pretty closed, fairly narrow, homogeneous community. And when I say lack of exposure, I mean, there are people who live in Orange Mound who have lived there for years. You talk about haven't seen the ocean. I'm talking about haven't seen the Mississippi River. Okay? There are kids there who haven't seen the Mississippi River. And so, but even within that community, I didn't exactly fit in as an elementary school kid. I was a little geek. Okay, I was a lot of nerdy. And I played the violin. Wasn't a lot of bros like me in the neighborhood, okay? So when the opportunity came up and it was the first year of the optional program, I chose to take a dare and go to Bellevue Junior High School, of which I knew no one, didn't know a single student there. And when I got there, it was very different. Central High School, and I was a couple years behind you, Central High School was a very unique place. Not only was it racially diverse, like 50-50 black-white, but it was socioeconomically diverse. I had classmates from Lamar Terrace, but I also had people don't know, from public housing, but I also had classmates with black and white from some of the wealthiest families in the state. I'm not just talking about the community. I mean, I went to school with rich white kids, rich black kids. It was very diverse. I will say I made changes when I got to Bellevue, and I was in an environment with such a diverse population of kids. Now, one change I did make, I switched from violin to saxophone because the girls weren't screaming for the fiddler, okay? And back in the 70s, horn players were kind of hot, okay? So I started playing saxophone. Being an overachiever, 7th grade, by the end of the 7th grade, I had first chair in the 9th grade band and went from there. But the biggest thing that happened is that 7th grade year, I told you I didn't know a single student when I got there. But I made connections and friends, and my 3 closest friends in the 7th grade, we named ourselves the Awesome Foursome. And to this day, they are my closest friends in my life, okay? You talk about lifelong relationships, and it just put me in a different view. And when I got to Central, not only did we go to school together, so my first year at Central was Florence Leffler's last year. So she was my principal too. And it was interesting about those pep rallies because when I got there, the pep rallies were integrated. So you all laid the groundwork for my unbelievable high school experience. Because not only did we go to school together and sit together in the pep rallies, we socialized together. We had parties at each other's houses. We went out. And I didn't appreciate at the time how unique that experience was. That's something not much seen before or very much not after in Memphis. And I tell you, though, I think it's a little reflective of the collective soul of Memphis. Because while Memphis is somewhat segregated, not as segregated as it was then, but still segregated, there's a collective soul about Memphians, okay? You see it in music, you see it in sports. And if you're a real Memphian, they love Memphis, okay? We will defend Memphis. Now, we by ourselves, we might talk about it. But if anybody else come out here and start talking bad about Memphis, we will beat them down. And you can tell real Memphians from Memphis because it's like, don't you talk about Memphis, okay? So I love growing up in Memphis. But even with that, I was excited about going away to school. And you will learn through the story, I'm a very decisive person. I applied to one college. I went to Emory University in Atlanta, even though I had never stepped foot in the city of Atlanta, which means I had never seen the campus until I showed up. But that's where I decided to go to school. And it was just another expansion of the stimulation from being in different environments and around different people. And I I believe at college, a lot of the learning is outside the classroom. You learn about yourself, you learn about from other people, you experience a lot of things, especially someone who changed a major 5 times, which I did. Went through 5 majors. And in the summers, I came back to Memphis. The first 2 years, Mud Island was open. I worked in the amphitheater, and I was a copy boy at the press scimitar, which no longer exists. But at the end of college, not only did I learn a lot about myself, one of those things is Memphis is a town, Atlanta's a city. I didn't know that, but there's a difference between a city and a town. I also learned that I love cities. And when I got through, I made 2 life decisions when I came to the end of my college career. 1, I wanted to pursue a career in marketing. And 2, I was going to marry that girl named Lynn Finley. So when I was 18 years old, freshman year, there was a girl on campus who I'd never heard, never seen, but everybody was at the Black House, and they were at her party. And it was the 19th birthday party. And back in those days, that was the drinking age, 19th big birthday party. I'm going to her party. Because one good thing about being from Orange Mound is that edge kind of stayed with you. Okay, you have to combine that with academics and other things. So I just called up to the house and said, my name is Marvin Davis, I come to your party. She's like, yeah, come to my party. So I go into the party, see her, first time I see her, I was like, wow. And she's there with her Georgia Tech varsity football boyfriend with 3% body fat. I didn't guess that he would introduce Dante 3% body fat. So, it's cool, I was a cross-country runner, so, I wasn't that big a guy. But I called her later on, grabbed her in the hall, kissed her, said, I like you. And the next day, I called one of my awesome foursome friends and said, I met a girl last night I could marry. I was 18. Okay, I said, I met a girl last night I could marry. So, go through all the years between then we got married. But so 1990, adulthood and life began. I graduated from grad school, started my marketing career at Procter & Gamble, and I married Lynn. And from there, I just went where the opportunity took me. I was like, I want to experience things, I want to go places, I want to do things. And where that took me, well, I'll just summarize it this way. I left Memphis, and then I went to Atlanta, to Columbus, Georgia, to Atlanta, to Cincinnati, Ohio, to Atlanta, to the Bay Area, California, to Atlanta, to North Jersey, to Philadelphia, to Scottsdale, Arizona, to Fairfax, Virginia, to Atlanta, and finally back to Memphis. And it's interesting in that I'm from Memphis, my wife's from Atlanta, but my kids are from Philly. That's where they went to middle school. That's where they went to high school. They are Philly kids. And we just went where the opportunity led us. And, I had, I guess more successes than failures. Had a chance to have a really good career. I was at Verizon Wireless. I launched the Can You Hear Me Now campaign. I was the first ever chief marketing officer at Comcast. I went to Arizona to launch this little startup called LifeLock, which when I got there was $130 million revenue, and earlier this year sold for $2.4 billion. Got to go to the New York Stock Exchange, clap hands, ring the bell, do all that stuff. So it was great. And so as the career started getting to a good point, I basically tapped out and went home. And I told Lynn, the kids are out. I got one kid in Brooklyn, one kid in LA. And I was like, I'm retiring. And then after about 3 or 4 months, she says, so what are you going to do? And I said, about what? And she's like, well, you can't just stay around here all day. And I said, I really can. And she's like, no, I really don't need you in my space like this all day. I said, you know what? I'll stay in the basement until after 5. And she said, I still know you're here. You need to find something else to do. I said, okay. And so all during that journey, I would still come home to Memphis every year. My parents are here, my sister is here, and I have the only grandkids. And so my kids would come here for the summer. We would come to visit every Christmas. I was still coming to Memphis. But what I realized is I wasn't really coming to Memphis. I was visiting my parents. And so all the things that were going on in Memphis were kind of new to me. I didn't get out into things. So last spring, when opportunity and desire and timing met, there became an opportunity to join ServiceMaster. And they were looking for a chief marketing and strategy officer. And my wife had kicked me out the house. So I was like, okay, I looked at it. I came to Memphis to interview. They're like, you tell your parents? I said, no, I don't want to get my parents' hope up. But Memphis, small town, you know. I can stand down on Union Avenue in 10 minutes, catch a ride home. So I'm just trying to get through the airport without anybody seeing me, okay? I interviewed on a Friday. The next Friday they called and told me, you have the job. And so I told my dad, and I told my parents, and then he called back and said, now I got to get a contractor to fix the ceiling because your mom went through it when she heard you were coming home. But here I am. Always had a love for Memphis, but it's a rediscovery for me. The most common question I get is, things changed a lot, haven't they? And I say, not enough. I have mixed feelings. I always wanted to live the good life in Memphis, live, nice neighborhoods, be able to live in a room and things like that. Those were dreams. Everybody wants to kind of come home. But I'm learning Memphis all over now, and I do have mixed feelings. I've lived all over the country, and I've lived in a lot of places, and I've traveled the world, and so I have optimism, but I have disappointment. I'm like, there's so much more we could be. And as you said, this is a good town. It could be a great town. And so I've been here a year now. I'm fortunate enough to be with an organization that can have some impact in the city. And now I'm just trying to figure out what I can do next, okay? And I will tell you the things that are good. When I was here, the worst place you wanted to be was near the Lorraine Motel. Okay, that was like worst part of town. Peabody was under renovation. There was no South of Main. So appreciate the progress that has happened here, because I do, and I'm learning it, and I want to be in the immerse of it. I live right downtown. I was like, I'm going to live in the city, but we need big ideas. Okay, we need this community to come together, and I am personally and professionally dedicated to find my small place of where hopefully I can help find a small circle for Memphis collectively to realize the potential of this great city of which we all hold so much love. And so I am glad to be home. I am, like I said, completing the circle, and just optimistic about what happens next in this story. Thank you.
Man, Marvin, thank you. Stuck the landing and the story. Marvin, thank you so much for your story. We really appreciate hearing from someone who has so much love for the city, and who now, as a professional and a grown-up, is returning to give of himself and hopefully of his whole company to help put things back into the city that made you who you are. Mark and I would like to close the show by thanking so much all of our storytellers. Can we have another round of applause for them?